evening, everybody. Hope everyone is having a wonderful evening and had a wonderful Wednesday. Real quick, I'd like to start by saying thank you to everyone who has watched any of the videos I've posted over the past week or subscribed. I've now had 2 videos over the past week surpass 1,000 views, which is super impressive for a channel of this size. So that's awesome to see. If you aren't already subscribed, I'd love for you to subscribe and hit the bell because we're going to have plenty of storms to talk about after this one over the next coming weeks and coming months going into the winter, where I can just about guarantee you we will have many more snowstorms to impact the country. And even going into spring and hurricane season, I will be super active. So go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell so you're always up to date with the latest information. All right, that is enough of that because we have a lot to get into today with this storm system as it is now beginning to barrel into the northern plains and eventually further east and south into the Midwest, the Southeast, and even the Northeast. So we're going to start by looking at the current watches and warnings issued by the National Weather Service. As you can see in these pink areas, these are winter storm warnings. In the orange areas, we have blizzard warnings. And then outside of that, we have winter storm watches and then winter weather advisories here in the purple. So right now we actually have snow breaking out across a pretty good section of the northern plains. So that's why we have these advisories up for those areas. A lot of those areas won't see as much snow as areas further eastbound just due to the fact that the storm hasn't really begun to gain the energy it needs to really ramp up into a powerful low pressure system that will produce blizzard conditions. We also have winter weather advisories here into the Appalachian Mountains and even a couple winter storm warnings for some onset ice and some snow on the front end of the precipitation going into tonight and tomorrow. We also have high wind warnings here in New England for this cold front. And something that you don't see on the map, but we have across a very large section of the south here and even into the plains, are wind chill watches, advisories, and warnings for absolutely brutally cold temperatures going into later this week after this cold front pushes through. So let's go ahead and start here by looking at satellite. As you can see, this is what is the beginning stage of our storm that is going to form here. And we are already having some snow breakout across these areas here in the greens and especially the oranges and the yellows that you see. Snow is beginning to fall in those areas. Let's take a look at radar now. As you can see, again, this is mainly snow breaking out here across the northern plains. We've even had, as you can see in some of these boxes that'll pop up here, some snow squall warnings, issued for some of these areas for super heavy snow with very strong gusty winds. Again, as you can see, snow is even breaking out further east here into Iowa, northern Missouri, down into Minnesota and Wisconsin, which are areas that are going to see plenty more snow going into the next 12 to 24 hours. These are our current temperatures, and I'm actually going to refresh this just in case it is updated a little bit, but you can really see this cold front. It is easy to find. I mean, look at that temperature gradient here in the northern plains, especially in Nebraska. I mean, look how sharp this is. Here in sections of eastern Colorado, I mean, you're pretty warm in the 50s, and then not that far to your north, you're in sub-zero temperatures in Nebraska. So an extremely sharp gradient here, and really just such a dynamic system that we're looking at with this storm. And you're going to see that now with the next thing we're going to talk about, which is actually the chance of some severe weather going into tomorrow in sections of eastern North Carolina and even central Florida. So with this low pressure system, as this cold front is going to begin to dive down, you're going to get a lot of onshore flow off of the Gulf and here in eastern North Carolina off of the Atlantic and the Gulf Stream. What that's going to do is help to allow storms to fire and potentially even rotate, giving a slight tornado risk, as you can see outlined here with the area of 2% on the beaches of eastern and southeastern North Carolina tomorrow. So again, really just an insanely dynamic system that we're having to work with here that is going to cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. So let's go ahead and look at the northern plains now. We're going to look at radar and futurecast using the NAM model through the country as the system begins to move through. So the northern plains, you're already getting it pretty good right now. NAM's doing a pretty good job here of showing some of these snow squalls developing back into Nebraska and even a pretty solid swath of snow here going into Minnesota and Iowa that will begin to push further east and southeast. as we go further into your Wednesday night and Thursday. So by the time we get into early Thursday morning, the snow is clearing out of the Dakotas and Nebraska, but what you're left with is absolutely frigid Arctic air and just bitter wind chills behind this front. So you're going to have that snow continuing into Iowa, sections of Minnesota, even into tomorrow morning before eventually clearing out into tomorrow afternoon when this begins to move into the Midwest. So we'll go ahead and look at the Midwest now and future cast for these areas. Again, pretty nice swath of snow moving through Iowa right now. That should continue into the evening before lighter snow begins to pick up going into the overnight. And you might get another batch of potentially a little bit of heavier snow on the end of this as this pulls out going into tomorrow, which is whenever it begins to move into areas like Illinois and Wisconsin and northern Missouri. Just a really pretty healthy swath of snow here going into these areas, and that's going to just slowly march eastbound. All right, moving this forward a little bit more. This is currently Thursday morning, skipping over to Thursday afternoon. Pretty heavy snow now moving into the Chicago area at this time. Most of eastern, Wisconsin, and then going down into the St. Louis metro. Pretty steady snow in those areas, and the winds will absolutely be whipping with this, which is why we have blizzard warnings for a lot of these areas, especially here in eastern Michigan, which we'll talk about as we go further ahead. Now going into your Thursday night, this line is going to begin to move to areas like Paducah, Kentucky, down into Gary, Indiana, and eventually into Indianapolis and most of the state of Michigan, seeing snow here going into your Thursday night into Friday morning. And you're also going to see that super sharp gradient with a little bit of rain on the front end before changing to, again, a pretty healthy swath of snow here all the way down into Kentucky, down into Ohio, going into your Friday morning and Thursday night. That will eventually move through. Same story as the Northern Plains. Once the snow stops, that doesn't mean you're out of the clear, because then you have to worry about the super, again, just really bone-chilling wind chills in these areas with temperatures in the single digits and the wind howling. You're going to, it feels like temperatures potentially lower than -10 and 20 degrees in some of these areas. So again, that is eventually going to move out snow-wise for a lot of these areas going into Friday, but you're going to be left with plenty of lake effect snow here coming into areas like eastern Michigan and northern Wisconsin, and even into areas of Ohio in the normal lake affected areas near Cleveland. So let's go ahead and move to our next area here, going into the Mid-South, into Kentucky, Tennessee, and further south. Again, this line's going to begin to move through, coming through Arkansas, going into your Thursday afternoon before eventually making it into northern Mississippi and eastern Tennessee, or excuse me, western Tennessee, going into Thursday night, as this is going to begin to march eastbound into the Nashville area, and even some flurries and flakes flying in northern Mississippi, Alabama, and potentially even as far east as northwest Georgia. Again, plenty of snow here for those areas. I wouldn't be surprised to see a quick inch or two in some of these areas, especially get the heavier flakes near the Nashville area and northbound into Kentucky. Less likely to see accumulations, but maybe a dusting in northern Mississippi and Alabama. That then begins to march eastbound here. Some light showers maybe ahead of that going into Georgia and the Carolinas. Some pretty good snow here on the into southern Appalachia, down into North Carolina and the Virginias. Maybe a quick inch or two the higher peaks in the northwest facing slopes, and a dusting in the valleys. So let's go ahead and now move into the Mid-Atlantic. Again, this is going into your, well, actually, we're going to back this up a little bit for the Mid-Atlantic because we have to talk about a little bit more precipitation moving through here on the front end. So going into tonight, actually, Wednesday night, you're going to begin to see some showers develop here across the Carolinas and Georgia. And this will eventually begin to pull northward as you get that onshore flow that we were talking about from the Atlantic and Gulf. And with that, we still have plenty cold temperatures locked in here to the mountains. And that is why, sorry, I did not mean to take that sounding. That's why we have these winter weather advisories issued for these areas. Is freezing rain will likely begin to develop mixed with sleet here into the mountains of North Carolina, and especially into the mountains of Virginia and West Virginia, and up into Maryland, where we actually have a couple winter storm warnings for this pretty impressive thumping of snow on the beginning, followed by some ice. Otherwise, pretty heavy rain actually here into the Carolinas going into your Thursday morning and afternoon, especially into the Charlotte metro up towards Raleigh and Greensboro. That will begin to pull north. And with that, like we were talking about, look at some of these cells actually coming off of the Atlantic onto the southeastern North Carolina beaches. Definitely could see some rotation in these, which really just goes to show how dynamic of a system this is, from brutally cold temperatures to the potential of tornadoes actually in southeastern North Carolina. Again, with this first slumping of snow here going into Pennsylvania, before that will eventually change to rain. Definitely be careful on the roadways there with that snow in the beginning before it eventually changes over, and really still locked in here into the mountains of West Virginia and extreme elevations into Maryland with this icy conditions with this precipitation. So going now into your Thursday afternoon and evening, that begins to clear out as we wait for this powerful cold front to move through the mid-Atlantic here. Again, a little bit of precipitation on the front side of this, likely rain in all areas. Could see a couple flakes on the back end in some areas further south into the Carolinas. Unlikely though. You're more likely to see that up into Virginia and northbound into Pennsylvania. But again, either way, brutally cold temperatures behind this line, and wind chills here in these areas could get still sub-zero as far south as Atlanta, but likely single digits into the Piedmont here of South Carolina and North Carolina, with right around 0 degree wind chills into the foothills. So that will begin to pull out going into your Friday as those cold temperatures begin to settle in. All right, let's go ahead and move to our last location here into New England. So overall, a pretty quiet day today in New England, and that will continue for most of tomorrow until we begin to see precipitation move in going into your tomorrow afternoon from the south and west. Likely some rain snow mix here on the front end for some areas. Higher elevations will likely see snow. Coastal areas more likely to see just about all rain during most of this event. Going into your Thursday night, again, heavy rain moving into Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and up into Cape Cod and further into Massachusetts. And the winds here are really going to be whipping. Another thing to worry about here is potentially some coastal flooding in this area as you're getting super strong onshore winds and really just this fire hose effect of moisture getting pulled up into sections of eastern New England going into your Thursday night and Friday morning. That will continue heavy rain before eventually likely a dry slot will move in between the actual cold front here and this kind of moisture up in front of the cold front that gets pulled northward. NAM here showing maybe a little bit of batch of snow moving in on the backside here into Scranton, PA, maybe some flurries down into Philly and even northern Delaware. And that likely will move into most of upstate New York with seeing some flurries on the backside of this. And maybe as far south as Connecticut and Rhode Island. Don't be surprised to see a stray snow shower or flurry going into your Friday night. And again, brutally cold temperatures on the backside of this, and plenty of that lake effect moisture coming in to areas like Buffalo and Erie, depending on exactly how the winds set up in these areas. All right, so that is New England. Now let's look at the total snowfall projected here with our National Weather Service blend of models nationwide. Again, already getting snow falling here into Nebraska and the Dakotas. Don't be surprised to see a couple inches in these areas, especially those that are able to get under some of those snow squalls. Could definitely see more snow. The snow will definitely begin to accumulate here into Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin as this band of snow moves through. Anywhere from 3 to 5 inches, a pretty safe bet through much of Iowa, where you're more likely to get a half a foot going into sections of northern and northeastern Wisconsin and into the UP of Michigan. With this, also, again, a pretty wide swath of 1 to 3 localized areas of 3 to 5 inches of snow through much of Illinois, Indiana, and going into Ohio. And some of those 3 to 5 totals could definitely even sneak down potentially into Kentucky. Pretty safe bet to see maybe about an inch through the northern half of Tennessee, with a dusting south of there, as far south as northern Mississippi and Alabama. And as this begins to move further eastbound with this cold front, you're going to get accumulating snow even into southwestern mountains of North Carolina, likely to at least see some flakes fly with the dusting to anywhere from an inch to 3 inches on the higher elevations. Another thing to notice here is look at on the front side, as we were talking about, that first thumping of snow coming here into Virginia and West Virginia. 1 to 3 inches is a safe bet. The really high peaks, again, could tap into 3 to 5 plus, maybe even if you get enough of that moisture and you can get it to stick well enough. As this begins, though, to move up into New England, uh, just really look at this lake effect snow that takes place. The real bullseye in terms of blizzard conditions, definitely here into western Michigan, in my mind. I think it's definitely the bullseye. Could easily see a foot to 2 feet, pretty likely on most places, but I wouldn't be surprised to see even close to 30 inches of snow in an isolated place in this area. And even into the UP, look at this snow coming off of the lakes, and that it will be the same story into the Buffalo area with potentially a foot of snow in a lot of these usual suspect lake effect locations. And then further into New England, could definitely see some pretty good snow up here into the mountains of New England. Coastal areas, unfortunately, more likely to just see a couple of flurries. All right, so let's look at the wind chill now that is expected in a lot of these areas. And I mean, just goodness, look at some of these already into South Dakota, negative 35 here going into tonight. And that is just going to begin to spread further eastbound and southward. As we go into tomorrow morning, a lot of areas are actually going to have their high temperature about midnight tonight through this region. And that high temperature, is only going to be into the upper 20s, low 30s, maybe even higher 30s in other areas. But you'll see these wind chills really just move through. I mean, you're looking at sub-zero wind chills down into Dallas, just about the entire state of Arkansas, likely seeing sub-zero degree wind chills, and that'll just continue to spread further eastbound. Looking here at Christmas Eve morning, sub-zero wind chills as far south as Atlanta, Georgia, and maybe even as far south as Columbia, South Carolina, and up into North Carolina. As for the mountains here, into the Carolinas, likely to see maybe as low as negative 30 degrees, which is forecasted for some of these areas in terms of wind chill. As for the northern plains, I mean, you're really there's going to be a very wide swath of near negative 50-degree wind chills in these areas, and pretty safe bet to see negative teens in terms of wind chills through a lot of the Ohio River Valley and going into the northeast before this eventually will begin to calm down going past Christmas into the following week. All right, so let's also look at the wind gusts, which are going to be a big problem with a lot of the snow that falls here. Again, strong winds already breaking out here into the plains, and this is only going to spread further east and really kind of, for lack of better terms, blob out as it gets here into the Midwest. Very widespread 30-mile-an-hour gusts for a lot of areas, which will likely get up into the 40-mile-an-hour range for a lot of areas, all the way from the Carolinas up to the Great Lakes. Once you get the cold front to move through, winds should calm down closer to gusting around 25 to 30 in a lot of areas here into the south, but still really strong winds as this thing really cranks up into the Great Lakes. I wouldn't be surprised to see hurricane force winds over the lakes and strong tropical storm force in a lot of these coastal areas near the Great Lakes. But power outages are going to be a big issue in a lot of these areas, and especially visibility will be the biggest. With all the snow falling, it'll be blowing around, and it will be very difficult to see in a lot of these areas. Luckily, winds will begin to calm down going into Christmas Day. So those are the winds, and that's mainly what I've got for this system that'll be moving through. I do want to touch on what is after this system, because I've seen a lot of questions I've been getting on Twitter about some of the model runs that we've been seeing for past this system going into early next week. And right now, nothing is set in stone with what is after this system, but I do think it's pretty likely we get some sort of piece of energy to likely dive out of the plains, and you'll definitely see snow there, maybe down into the Midwest. And then after that, it's really a big question mark of can we get some kind of phasing to occur and low pressure to form along the Gulf. And some models have even been showing that, potentially moving up the coast. But by the time we get to this point, we'll kind of be on the latter end of this cold snap that we're going through right now. So temperatures will begin to moderate. So we'll have to worry about that. And we'll also just have to get a system to form in the first place. But those are all still on the table, all those options, and we'll have plenty of time to discuss that after we get through this weekend and all of the very dangerous weather moving through the country right now. So that's all I've got for today. Again, if you don't follow me on Twitter, I'd love for you to do that. I tweet a lot there. I post a lot. and I engage a lot with a lot of my followers on there. But that's all I've got for this Wednesday. Hope everyone has a warm and safe weekend. I'll probably post 2 videos tomorrow, one in the morning and one in the evening, as tomorrow will kind of be the peak of this as it begins to move into the Tennessee and Ohio river valleys. But I know this is my 3rd time saying this, but I hope everyone has a warm and super safe rest of their Wednesday night, and I will see you all tomorrow.